Get started. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Elizabeth Killian. I am the Provider Relations Manager with OMPP. And just to double check, can someone on my team advise that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we
I
can
can
hear you
hear
fine.
you.
Great, thank you so much. So we are going to be discussing the recent ABA, specifically the last bulletin that just recently came out, but information that has been presented in several of the previous bulletins that have been published as well. Our agenda this morning, we are going to cover the steps for members to receive covered services. We're going to discuss members that are currently receiving services and being transitioned into the new PA requirements and what specifically is required and when. We're going to discuss the comprehensive diagnostic evaluation, touch on the upcoming state plan amendment just briefly, and then also briefly take a look at the ABA provider enrollment requirements. We are going to hold questions and collect those and answer those at a later time, just so that everyone is aware. So I am going to start pretty much at the very, very beginning of when a member may be considered for ABA services. And I suspect that most of the individuals on this webinar are ABA providers or work very closely in the ABA space. So this might seem like quite a bit of a starting at a point prior to to things you already know. But we just want to ensure that everyone is familiar with what elements are needed for ABA PA approval and where each of those elements come from in the process of being covered for ABA services. So bear with me while we break this down pretty simply. So obviously the comprehensive diagnosis is the first element that is needed in the ABA PA process. And that begins by either a parent or maybe a primary medical provider being concerned that a child may have autism spectrum disorder. And based on that, they will be referred to a qualified healthcare provider to perform the comprehensive diagnosis evaluation. That qualified healthcare provider must have training in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM autism criteria. And those specific providers who can complete that comprehensive diagnosis evaluation are those HSPPs, licensed physicians, APRNs, and licensed physician assistants. And once the member has been referred to one of these qualified healthcare providers, that person completes the comprehensive comprehensive diagnostic evaluation. And then this provider will send the CDE and the referral to an ABA provider that the member and family chooses to provide ABA care. Once that CDE and the referral are sent to the ABA provider will complete the behavior assessments. OMPP does now require the Vinland Comprehensive Parent Interview Form, the Behavior Assessment System for Children Parenting Relationship Questionnaire, and then an age-appropriate objective direct skills assessment. And all of those items are collected together and are collectively called the behavior assessment. So anytime that you see OMPP or any of the managed care entities or Centra/Gainwell on the fee-for-service side referring to the behavior assessment, we do mean all three of those elements. I know that number 2 there does have behavior assessment in the name, but we mean collectively all of them together. Once the ABA provider has completed the behavior assessment, those elements are all reviewed together and leads to the creation of the treatment plan. The treatment plan should include recommendations for specific treatments and the amounts of each treatment, and then also how long within the prior authorization period each specific treatment will be provided. And then finally, all of those elements are submitted to the correct payer for the initial approval of services. So again, you want to make sure that you have a CDE that is less than 1 year old, the referral, the behavior assessment, and the treatment plan. If the CDE is greater than 1 year old, you will need to submit a statement of need. However, the statement of need is the referral and an up-to-date behavioral assessment. So if this is the initial approval for services, you should already have the elements that are needed, but you also do need to submit the CDE so that we know the age and the date of that element. And one of the questions that we have received most often is how to receive ongoing approval and specifically what elements are needed for that ongoing approval. There has been a lot of confusion specifically regarding that CDE and whether that is needed for the ongoing approval, and specifically if it has to be with less than 1 year old at the time. The answer to that is no. You do need to have the CDE, generally speaking, on file. However, for ongoing approval for the PA, the only elements that need to be submitted is the treatment plan with an updated discussion of the goals that have been outlined and where the member stands in meeting those goals, and then a new behavior assessment if new behaviors are identified or if new services are being requested. So essentially, if you are looking to add anything or if behaviors have changed and therefore treatments need to be changed, that's when a new behavior assessment would be required. But the main element is going to be that treatment plan, and you do want to ensure that that is updated every 6 months with where they are in hitting their current goals. The next question that we have received from providers quite often is how members who have been already receiving ABA services can transition into these updated PA requirements. Number one, as I've already mentioned, you do want to make sure that you have the CDE and the referral on file. That does not need to be submitted to get a new PA to continue services, but you do need to make sure that that is on file. And then just as we have mentioned for continuation of services, even after an initial approval, you want to make sure that you use the direct observation information and include information on the current goals and submit that updated treatment plan and the updated behavior assessment as needed. And that would be very similar to what we just discussed for even new members as they continue through their treatment and have to get that updated or continuation of services PA. And also very similar to what we just mentioned, if you are requesting new or additional services for a member who is already receiving services, you would need a new behavior assessment and a new statement of need, which again includes the referral and the updated behavioral assessment. So just to reiterate, the CDE and the referral are not necessarily needed to be with every continuation of services PA. The referral may be needed if a statement of need is required for those new or additional services. So speaking of that comprehensive diagnostic evaluation again, the main point that we want to continue to reiterate over and over again is that the CDE must be on file with the ABA provider who is currently providing services. And the only time that we really would need a new CDE after the initial one, and I will put in the caveat that this is our current guidance and this may, there may be some additional information once the state plan is implemented. However, if there is not a CDE on file with the current ABA provider, a new CDE is required. And you can see here as if you are transitioning services between one ABA provider and another, for whatever reason, the member or the family decides to move to a different provider, the best practice is, of course, that the initial ABA provider would transition the CDE to the new ABA provider. There should be, direct communication regarding where the member is with their goals and, how they can continue services with the new provider. And within that conversation, a transition of the CDE should take place. If for whatever reason that is not possible and the CDE cannot be acquired from the initial diagnosing provider, then that is when a new CDE is required. So there have been a lot of questions that we've received about whether or not a new CDE is required if the initial one is over a year old, and hopefully you have gathered already through what I've covered here that that is not the case, that only a new CDE is required if one is not on file with the current provider. Most people have heard that there is a state plan amendment that has been submitted to the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services for approval. We won't be covering the specifics of that state plan amendment today. The effective date will be 30 days after the SPA is approved by CMS. And we will absolutely have much more information available for you all once the state plan amendment has been approved. And I would be very much willing to bet that we will have another webinar as well so that we can ensure that information is well presented to you and you have the opportunity to provide feedback. So next, I just want to very quickly touch on provider enrollment for ABA providers. Effective July 1st, 2025, all rendering ABA providers must match the level of ABA service billed on the claim. You want to make sure that you include the specific modifier to indicate the level of ABA provider and service that is being rendered. And please refer back to the bulletins that have all of that information. And we do also want to indicate this note here that the RBTs are not required to be credentialed by CAQH for managed care enrollment. We have heard from providers that a lot of the managed care enrollment forms have an area or a space for the CAQH number and that kind of information from CAQH. It is not needed. You would want to make sure that you discuss with the managed care entity of how you can bypass that information on the application to ensure that the application is submitted and processed correctly. And each managed care entity's enrollment forms are just a little bit different. So unfortunately, we don't have guidance that works for every single managed care entity. But if you reach out to those individuals, they can absolutely provide that context and direction for you. So obviously, we know that there are many questions about both the prior authorization and the provider enrollment aspects of these changes. For both prior authorization and provider enrollment, you want to first contact the payer that you have the questions with. So for prior authorization, you can contact the member's MCE. We highly recommend that you speak directly with the PA department of each of the managed care entities, as they will have all of the specific information that you need. While the provider helplines for the managed care entities are very, very helpful, they are definitely a jack of all trades, master of none kind of entity. They have to be able to solve all of the different questions that members and providers have. So if you do reach out to the PA department specifically, they will have much more specific information for you. And of course, for traditional Medicaid, for PA questions, you can reach out to Acentra. Finally, for the IHCP enrollment piece, if you have questions about your overall IHCP enrollment or any of the enrollment for any of your rendering providers, then you will want to contact Gainwell Technologies. And again, once you get to the point of enrolling all of the rendering providers with the managed care entities, you want to contact that member's MCE. And again, just like with the prior authorization, we highly recommend that you reach out directly to the provider enrollment team. And if you visit each of the managed care entities' websites, they all have direct contact information for provider enrollment. If you do have continued issues, please contact my team, the Provider Relations team with OMPP, at the email address here on the screen. With that, I just want to go over some quick resources that we have available for providers in all facets of the Medicaid program. Of course, All of the managed care entities and Gainwell have provider relations representatives that you can reach out to. We highly recommend that you reach out to those individuals first before reaching out to OMPP. The provider reference materials on the IHCP provider website, such as the bulletins and provider reference modules, and those are often my team's first location to identify answers to any of the questions. So if you visit those materials, you may find the answer to whatever question that you may have. And then, of course, the provider education tab on the IHCP provider website as well has previous webinars, past presentations from roadshows and seminars, and a wealth of additional information. And finally, if you are not receiving updates from the IHCP, we highly recommend that you sign up for those updates. If you go to the IHCP provider website and scroll to the bottom of nearly any page, you will see this green box, Get Important News and Updates. And if you click on that sign up button there, you can enter your email address and sign up for a wealth of different newsletters from the state of Indiana, from all of FSSA. So if you want to ensure that you receive the bulletins and then any other news announcements, code set updates, updates to the provider reference modules, any of that information, you want to make sure that you click on the option for the newsletter for Medicaid providers, and that will ensure that you can receive those emails. And of course, already mentioned our provider relations inbox, but how can we help you? You can always reach out to any of the teams within the Medicaid program. You do want to make sure that you utilize your provider relations representatives first with a specific payer in which you're having concerns. But you can reach out to the provider relations inbox at the email there on the screen for any of your individual provider concerns that require assistance. And we also have our IHCP Listens inbox, where you can give feedback on IHCP presentations, ideas for future presentations, which we are more than happy to refer back to your ideas. We want to provide all of the information that you would like to receive. And then if you have questions that you would like to have answered in a future publication, please reach out to us as well. With that, that is all of the information that I have for today. This presentation is being recorded, and we will post this on our website within the next week or so. It takes a little bit of time to get that completed, but it'll be on its way to the website. And we thank you so much for your time today.